Hidden history of the Industrial Revolution. Imagine a world spinning with gears and smoke, where giant machines roared to life, changing everything. People built amazing factories, and new inventions popped up like magic. Everyone knows about the steam engines and the busy mills. But what if there was a secret, a hidden part of this powerful story that no one ever talked about? What if the true spark for all that incredible change wasn't just human cleverness, but something much, much older and far more mysterious? Our story begins with a girl named Alara. She was 12 years old, with eyes as bright and curious as a robin finding a new worm. Alara lived in a small, dusty town, tucked beside a river that once powered many mills. Now, most of those mills stood empty, like giant sleeping beasts made of brick and wood. The air still carried a faint smell of coal and old oil, a whisper of the town's busy past. Alara loved exploring these old places. While other kids played with hoops and jumped rope, Alara saw history in every creaky floorboard and every rusted pipe. One hot summer afternoon, Alara decided to explore the oldest mill in town, known as Blackwood Mill. It was the first one built, towering over everything else with its tall chimney, now broken at the top like a snapped tree branch. People said it was haunted, but Alara just thought it was quiet. The mill's big wooden doors were always locked tight with a heavy, rusty chain. But Alara, being small and quick, knew about a small, hidden window around the back that had a broken latch. It was her secret entrance, a tiny gateway to a forgotten world. She squeezed through the window, landing softly on a pile of old, musty sacks. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that broke through the high, dirty windows. The air inside was still and heavy, smelling like old wood and metal. Giant shadows stretched across the floor, cast by silent machines that looked like sleeping giants. Looms stood frozen, their threads long gone. Spinning frames waited, forever still. It was like time had stopped inside Blackwood Mill many, many years ago. Alara walked slowly, her small footsteps echoing in the vast space. She traced her fingers over cold, iron levers. She imagined the noise, the heat, the rush of people working. She reached a part of the mill she hadn't explored much before. It was a section deeper inside, where the light was even dimmer. Here, the machines looked different. They were older, bigger, and somehow more rough. Their gears were huge, like teeth of a monster, and the metal was darker, almost black. It felt heavier, somehow. She noticed a small, wooden door hidden behind a stack of broken wooden crates. It wasn't like the other doors, which were usually big and made for wagons. This one was small, plain, and looked like it had been forgotten. It was slightly ajar, just a tiny crack. Alara's heart thumped a little faster. Curiosity, a powerful force inside her, pulled her towards it. She pushed the door open carefully. It groaned, a long, sad sound, as if waking from a very long sleep. Inside, it was pitch black. Alara took out her small flashlight, a gift from her dad. Its beam cut through the darkness, dancing over dusty shelves filled with strange tools she didn't recognize. There were old, leather-bound books piled high, their pages brittle with age. But what really caught her eye was a table in the center of the room. On it, under a thick layer of dust, was a wooden box. It wasn't a fancy box, just a plain, dark wood box, but it had a strange symbol carved into its lid. The symbol looked like a sun with many twisting rays, but at its heart was a perfect, smooth circle. Alara carefully lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was not gold or jewels, but a single, smooth, dark stone. It was about the size of her palm, perfectly round, and so dark it seemed to soak up the light from her flashlight. It didn't sparkle, but it had a deep inner glow, a faint, pulsing light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It felt warm to the touch, like it had just been held by someone. A strange feeling washed over Alara, a mix of wonder and a tiny bit of fear. This was no ordinary stone. As she held the stone, a faint hum started, not in her ears, but inside her head. The light from the stone grew brighter, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She looked closer at the stone. It wasn't just dark, it was like looking into a deep, endless night sky, with tiny, swirling patterns moving inside it. It felt alive. Alara remembered her grandmother's stories, old tales about hidden powers and ancient magic. She had always thought they were just stories. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, and the room around her seemed to shimmer. The dust motes in the air started to swirl faster, like tiny stars in a dark galaxy. Alara felt a pull, a strange tingle in her fingertips that went all the way up her arm. The stone pulsed with a gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. She quickly put it back in the box, closing the lid. The humming stopped, and the room went back to being still and quiet, as if nothing had happened. Alara took a deep breath. She knew she had found something truly special, a secret that had been hidden for a very long time. She decided to keep the stone a secret. She carefully moved the broken crates back in front of the little door and slipped out the window, her heart still thumping a rhythm against her ribs. For days, the stone filled her thoughts. She imagined it sparking the machines to life, turning the giant gears with its mysterious energy. Could this be the real reason Blackwood Mill became so powerful, so fast? Why had it been hidden? One evening, Elara couldn't resist. After everyone was asleep, she crept out of her room, carrying her backpack. She rode her old bike back to the mill, the night air cool against her face. She slipped inside, the moon casting long, eerie shadows. The small room looked even more mysterious in the faint moonlight. She opened the box, and the stone glowed, a soft, inviting light in the darkness. This time, she didn't just hold it. She looked at the strange carvings on the walls of the small room. They weren't just drawings. They were like old maps, showing patterns that looked like gears and lines of power. And then she saw it, a small indentation in the center of one of the patterns, exactly the size and shape of the stone. It was on a large, stone slab that looked like an altar, but also like a giant control panel. With trembling hands, Elara placed the dark stone into the indentation. The moment it clicked into place, the room came alive with a low thrumming sound. Not just in her head this time, but real, vibrating through the floorboards. Lines of faint, blue light spread out from the stone, tracing the patterns carved into the slab and up the walls. The air grew warm, and a faint, electrical smell filled the space. The blue light intensified, creating an otherworldly glow. Then, from deep within the mill, she heard it, a low groan, like an ancient beast waking up, followed by another, louder one. The whole mill began to vibrate. Elara gasped. This wasn't just a stone, it was a key. It was powering something huge, something that had been asleep for a century. The blue light from the stone pulsed faster, and the patterns on the walls glowed with an incredible energy. She heard creaking and rumbling from the main mill floor. Curious and a little scared, Elara quickly took the stone out of its spot. The blue light faded, and the rumbling stopped. She put the stone back in its box, tucked it safely in her backpack, and peered out the small wooden door. What she saw made her jaw drop. The giant machines in the main mill, the ones that had been silent and still for so long, were now glowing with faint, blue lines of their own. They weren't moving, but they were humming. It was as if the mill was breathing, ready to awaken. This was incredible. This was the hidden history. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about human brains. It was about this stone, this ancient power. Elara realized that someone had discovered this power long ago and used it. But then they must have gotten scared, or maybe they wanted to keep it secret. That's why the mill was shut down, and the stone hidden. She wondered who had found it first. What was their story? She felt a sudden weight of responsibility. She held a secret that could change everything people thought they knew about history. The next few days were a blur of restless nights and secret trips back to the mill. Elara started looking through the old, dusty books she'd seen in the hidden room. Many were just old ledgers, lists of supplies and wages. But one, bound in rough, dark leather, was different. Its pages were filled with strange symbols, like the ones on the wall, and handwritten notes in a fancy, looping script. The notes were difficult to read, but a few words stood out: ether stone, prime mover, infinite energy. She learned that the man who built Blackwood Mill, a brilliant but strange inventor named Elias Thorne, had found the stone deep within the earth, beneath the very ground the mill now stood on. He had spent years studying it, unlocking its secrets, and building machines that could channel its energy. The book described how the stone didn't just power machines, but it could make them think faster, learn quicker, and adapt better. It was like giving the machines a tiny, glowing brain. This wasn't just mechanical power, it was something more, something almost magical. Thorne had discovered that the ether stone, as he called it, could influence the metal itself, making it stronger, lighter, and more efficient. It was the reason his machines were so far ahead of their time. Other mills struggled with broken parts and slow production, but Blackwood Mill, powered by the stone, worked flawlessly, churning out goods at an impossible rate. The book also spoke of a warning. The stone's power was immense, but it was also wild and unpredictable if not managed correctly. Thorne wrote about strange occurrences, machines sometimes developing a will of their own, tiny flashes of light appearing from the gears, whispers in the night. He feared that if the stone's power was fully unleashed without understanding its limits, it could not only power the world but also unravel it. He worried about greedy people using it for war or total control. Thorne, in his final entries, wrote about the great fear he felt. He saw how the world was changing with his inventions, but he also saw the danger. He made a hard choice. He slowly disconnected the stone from the main mill, piece by piece. He sealed it away, hoping it would be forgotten, and hoped that humanity would learn to control its own future without relying on such a wild, powerful secret. He wrote of his hope that one day, someone with a pure heart, not driven by greed, would find it and understand its true potential and its true dangers. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. Elias Thorne had been a visionary, but also a protector. He hadn't just built a mill. He had tried to guard humanity from a power it wasn't ready for. She understood why the mill was shut down, why the stone was hidden. It wasn't about failure, it was about protection. She realized the stone was not just a power source, it was a living key to a forgotten branch of science, or maybe even magic, that Thorne had barely touched. It influenced not just the physical world but maybe even thoughts and intentions. Could it be that the very ideas and inspirations of the Industrial Revolution were subtly influenced by the stone's hidden presence, even when it was mostly dormant? Had its faint energy seeped into the very air, sparking flashes of brilliance in the minds of inventors, pushing them towards innovation without them even knowing why? Ilara thought about all the famous inventors, the brilliant minds. Had they, without realizing it, been touched by this ancient power, a subtle whisper that guided their hands to create the steam engine, the spinning jenny, the power loom? It was a mind-bending idea, a secret history woven into the very fabric of progress. The history books always said it was human genius, hard work, and good timing. But what if there was another, secret ingredient, a subtle, invisible force pushing humanity forward? One night, as Ilara sat alone in the small, hidden room, holding the ether stone, she felt its warmth spread through her hands. She thought about Thorne's warning, about the stone's unpredictable nature. She also thought about its potential. Imagine if this power could be used for good, to heal, to create, to connect people, not just to power machines for making things. A different kind of thought started to form in her mind, a plan. She couldn't just keep the stone hidden forever, not after knowing what it truly was. She also couldn't just leave it to be found by someone with bad intentions. She needed to understand it more, to truly learn how to control it, not just to turn it on and off. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to share its real history, the one Elias Thorne had tried to bury. Ilara decided to start small. She remembered Thorne's notes about the stone making metal thing. She looked at a small, broken gear from one of the mill's machines. It was rusted and missing a tooth. She carefully held the ether stone near it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint blue glow enveloped the gear. Ilara focused, imagining the gear hole, strong, turning perfectly. It was a silly thought, she knew, but she tried it anyway. To her amazement, a tiny spark of blue light flickered from the stone and touched the broken part of the gear. A faint hum started, and the rust on the gear seemed to flake away. The metal shimmered. When the glow faded, Ilara looked closely. The broken tooth was not fully restored, but it was smoother, less jagged, as if someone had subtly reshaped it. The metal felt somehow more alive, less dead. It wasn't magic in the way of a fairy tale, but a subtle, powerful influence on matter itself. Ilara spent weeks experimenting in secret, learning more about the stone's subtle influence. She started a small notebook, just like Thorne's, filling it with her own observations and drawing. She noticed that the stone seemed to respond to her intentions, her focus. If she imagined something working better, it seemed to subtly nudge the object towards that state. It was a slow, quiet power, not a dramatic explosion of energy. It was about improving, enhancing, subtly guiding. She understood now why Thorne called it the prime mover and worried about its unpredictable nature. It wasn't just a force. It had a quiet will, or at least it amplified the will of its user. It wasn't just making machines work. It was making them work better and perhaps even in ways that were a little too perfect, a little too efficient, making them almost sentient. The whispers Thorne heard? Perhaps it was the stone subtly pushing ideas into his mind, showing him what was possible. One day, Ilara found another entry in Thorne's book, hidden in a folded-over page. It spoke of a second stone, a smaller piece broken off from the main ether stone during its extraction from the earth. Thorne believed this smaller piece, if found, could act as a regulator, a way to control and focus the immense power of the larger stone, making it safer to use. He had feared that even just the one stone, without its counterbalance, was too raw, too strong. This new clue filled Ilara with a fresh sense of purpose. If she could find the second stone, perhaps she could truly understand and safely wield this incredible power, not just for herself, but for everyone. Maybe the second stone held the key to unlocking the full, safe history of the Industrial Revolution, to showing the world the true secret behind the greatest leap in human innovation. She imagined a future where this power wasn't hidden away, but understood, used wisely, and taught to generations to come. She looked at the first stone, pulsing gently in her hand. It felt less like a dangerous secret now and more like a waiting teacher. The hidden history of the Industrial Revolution wasn't just about what happened, but also about what could happen, what secrets lay dormant, waiting for the right person to discover them and finally bring them into the light. Elara knew her journey had only just begun. The old, silent mill, once a tomb of secrets, now felt like a bustling school, ready to teach her lessons far beyond anything in any history book. She gripped the stone, her eyes shining with determination, ready to uncover the rest of the forgotten truth, piece by hidden piece.